Okay, here's a problem that I face every single time. Whenever I come to YouTube, I see all these thumbnails. And all of these thumbnails are designed to grab my attention. And more often than not, I find myself in a position where I came for something and then I'm watching an entirely different video. This happens to me quite a lot. So in this video, I'm going to fix this problem by creating a browser extension that will potentially hide all of these distracting elements, at least for a time period. And let me show you what I'm talking about. So after installing this extension, when you click on this extension icon, you'll see this little pop-up that has this very simple UI. And this just has a single toggle. I can click on this toggle to enable the Zen mode. As soon as I enable the Zen mode, you'll see that the entire home page gets replaced by this very simple and minimal UI. And this just has a single search input. So if I want, I can actually search for something. For example, let's say if I am searching for my channel, I can search for any of the things and then I can click on any of the video. Now, if you notice carefully in this watch page also, we are not seeing any recommendations. So all of those recommendations that could potentially distract you is also hidden in this page. And then let's say when you want to get out of this focused mode, you can click on this extension, you can turn off the Zen mode, and it will then revert back to the original YouTube UI. I'm going to be using WXT framework to build cross-browser extensions. And by cross-browser, I mean one code base will create extensions for all of the major browsers like Firefox, Chrome, Edge, you get the idea. So the first step is to create a fresh WXT framework project. And to do that, I'm going to execute this command pnpm WXT. Let's use the latest version of this and then init. If you're using npm, the command for you would be npx WXT latest init. Here I can specify the name of my project folder. So let's call this YouTube Zen. And then it is asking me to choose a template. I'm going to choose the React template for this one. And then for the package manager, I'm going to be using pnpm. And now I can cd into this YouTube Zen folder. I can execute this command pnpm install to install all of the dependencies. And then I can open this folder inside of the code editor. Now, if we just take a look at the folder and file structure, you'll see that we have a bunch of folders here: assets, entry points, node modules, public, and then some of the files. We are only interested in two things: this entry points folder and then this wxt.config.ts file. But before we talk about these entry points and wxt configuration file, let's first see how do we actually install the extension in the browser and see if the extension is working or not. So if I go to my package.json file, you'll see that we have a lot of commands available. Essentially three types of command: dev command, build command, and then we have this zip command. So all of these commands are pretty much self-explanatory. When we are doing development, we'll be using these commands. When we need to create a build during development, we'll use these. But let's say when we need to upload these packages to the extension store, we'll actually create a zip and then upload this zip to the appropriate store. If you notice carefully that for the dev command, we have two commands available: dev and dev::firefox. So if you just run dev, it is going to target the Chrome browser. But if you want to target the Firefox browser, you can actually do this. Let me show you. So if I come here and I run this command pnpm run dev, it is going to open a Chrome browser window, as you can see. And the interesting thing is it has already installed the extension for us. So you can see WXT React started. I can pin this for now. When I click on this, you'll see some of the content. Now there's just one problem. I do not want this extension to be installed in a separate instance of Chrome. I want to install this extension in the browser that I use myself, that has all my accounts and all of the configuration. So let's see how we can do that. I'm going to close this, and then in the VS Code, I'm going to terminate this process. At the root of this project, I'm going to create a file called webxt.config.ts and make sure the file name should be exactly like this. In this file, I'm just going to import the find runner config from WXT, and then I'm just going to disable this. So now when I execute this command pnpm dev, you'll see that it is not going to open any Chrome window. And what this is telling me now, that you need to load this output Chrome ME3 extension manually. So that means if you take a look at this output folder, this contains this Chrome MV3 folder. So we just need to load this folder in the Chrome browser to see our extension. So I'll come to my Chrome browser. I'll click on these three dots. I will then go to extensions, and then I'll go to manage extensions. And then here what we need to do, we need to click on this load unpacked button. And then I'll choose my YouTube Zen folder. And then here I need to select the folder that is present inside of the .output folder. And as you can see that I'm not able to see this folder. folder. And the reason for that is because it starts with a dot. So macOS is treating it as a hidden folder. So to show all of these hidden folders, I'm going to hit Command Shift and dot. And now I can see my hidden folders also. So I'm going to click on this dot output and then I'm going to choose Chrome MV3. So I'm going to select this one and now you can see that our extension is appearing over here. So if I click on this, you'll see this WXT React Starter. I can pin this, and if I click on this, you'll see the content of the extension. Okay, let's now talk about this entry points folder. Now this entry point folder contains a few things: content.ts, background.ts, and then we have this pop-up. So let's start with this pop-up. So if you come to the browser and click on this extension icon, the UI that you see here is actually the pop-up. And this pop-up is like a mini page that appears when you click on the extension icon. As soon as I click on anywhere else outside of this pop-up, you'll see that it gets hidden. Now, since this is like a mini page, so it can contain its own HTML, CSS, and JavaScript over here. And the code that you add in this extension pop-up runs in an entirely different context. And if you want to become good at creating browser extensions, it is very important for you to understand where your code is running. Let me show you. So if we come to the entry points folder, you'll see this pop-up folder, and you'll see that we have a few files present over here. So we have this app.css file, very simple CSS file. Then we have this app.tsx. So if you notice carefully, this is the UI that we are seeing inside of the pop-up, right? And then this is loading the CSS file. Then we have this index.html file, and then we have this main.tsx file. So if you notice carefully, inside of this index.html file, we are loading this main.tsx file, okay? And inside of this file, what we are doing, we are just getting the app component and we're finding the element in the DOM that has the ID of root. And then we are trying to render the app component inside of that element that has the ID of root. So if you take a look at this index.html, you'll see this is the div with an ID of root. Now do keep in mind that when I say we are looking for an ID of root in the document object model, so I'm not talking about what you see over here. I'm talking about what you see inside of the pop-up, because this is an entirely different context. It has nothing to do with this page altogether. And then we have the style.css file, which we are importing probably in this file main.tsx. But here's the thing. If I go to app.tsx file and inside of this app function, let me add this log console.log app. Where do you think we are going to see that log? Do you think we are going to see the log over here? Let me refresh this one. You can see that we are not seeing any logs over here. Okay, let me show you. If I click on this, the pop-up UI appears, and I can click on this, go to inspect, go to console, and here you'll see that we are seeing that log. So that means the code that we are adding over here runs in a different context inside of this pop-up only. Okay, similar to this pop-up, you have this content script, and the content script is a JavaScript file that gets injected in the actual page, and this has access to the document object model of the page. Okay, which page I'm talking about? Imagine that you are creating a browser extension that only works with google.com, right? So what would happen is whenever you go to google.com, our extension is going to inject a JavaScript file that is going to be executed in the Google page. That means whatever you include over here will appear as if it was directly the part of the Google page. Let me show you. So right now you can see that we are matching the google.com. So that means if we go to google.com, so let me try going to google.com, and if I click on this inspect, go to console, you'll see that we are seeing our logs over here, hello content. And then finally we have this background script, and background script runs in the background of the browser. It stays active even when the extension pop-up is closed, and similar to pop-up, it cannot also directly access the web page content. Only the content script can access the web page content. Okay, so if you notice carefully, this also contains a log, hello background. Where do you think we are going to see this log? Well, you can see all of the logs are related to your background script. If you just come to the extension, you'll see this service worker. I can click on this and then it opens another window, and here you can see that all of the logs related to the service worker, your background script, will be present over here. Okay, here's a very important thing. So if you take a look at the folder structure, folder and file structure inside of the entry points, you will see that we are creating the content script like this. It is just a single file. And then for pop-up, we have this folder, and then we have all of these files related with the pop-up. So if you want, you can follow this directory convention even for background and content script if you want. So you could either create your entry points like this, or you can create your entry points like this. It is just a matter of preference. It is very important that if you want to create a background script and you are just creating a single file, you need to name this file as background.ts. If you're following the directory structure, and then inside of this background folder, you will create this index.ts file. So the name of the file is important. Okay, so at this point, we now understand the pop-up, the background, and then the content. There's one more important file that you need to know, and it's called manifest file. So manifest is a special file that basically contains the entire configuration of your browser extension, and we usually create that file at the root of the directory. But if you notice carefully, we are not seeing any manifest.json file over here, and the reason for that is because with WXT framework, the manifest file gets automatically created. Let me show you. If I go to this output folder and then this Chrome MV3 folder, you'll see this manifest.json file. I can click on this file and it will show me all of the things like manifest version 3, the name and description of my extension, the version, icons, some of the commands, then background service workers, action, host permissions, and then the permissions that this extension has. Now, if you want to customize any of these options, so right now if you see that the name is WXT React Starter and the description is manifest.json description, and you will see this title and description if you come to your extension page. This is what we are seeing over here. Let's say you want to customize this. How would you do that? So for that, what you can do, you can actually come to your wxt.config.es, and then here I can use this manifest property, and then here I can actually specify all of the manifest options that I need to customize. For example, the name of my extension will be Zen YouTube, and probably the description could be Zen YouTube is a browser extension that helps you to watch videos in a Zen mode. I don't know, whatever that means. Okay, and then we have this version. Let's set it to version 0.1, and now I can save this one. If I now take a look at this manifest.json file, you'll see we have this over here, and we should be seeing these changes over here. If you're not seeing the changes, you may need to click on this reload button, and now you can see that we have all of these changes available. Okay, let's now start creating the functionality for the extension. I'll start with the content script. So I'll go to entry points folder and then go to content.ts. The first thing that I'm going to change in this is that I want my extension to work with youtube.com. So when I change this to youtube.com, what this means is this content script should be injected to all the pages of the youtube.com. Since this is a content script, what I can do, I can get access to this body element, and then I can say body.innerHTML, and let's set it to hello world. So now you can see that when I now come to YouTube, we are seeing this hello world because we replace the entire content of the body with this hello world. What if I want to style this hello world? How can I do that? That is very simple. First of all, what I can do, I can give this a class or something. Let's give this a class of, I don't know, maybe injected heading or something. And then what I can do, probably inside of this assets folder, let's create a file called main.css. The name of this file can be anything, okay? And then I can choose this injected heading. And then let's give this a font size of 20 rem. And then I can include my CSS file like this in the content script. So now when I come to the browser and do a reload of my extension, you'll see that the styles are being applied. However, I do not like the approach of using custom CSS. I want to use Tailwind CSS for style related things. So let's actually set up Tailwind CSS in this project. First of all, I'm going to install Tailwind CSS, post CSS and auto prefixer as dev dependency. And then I'm going to initialize the Tailwind in the current project by passing this -p option. What this means is that create a post CSS configuration file also. So now we have two files, post css.config.js and tailwind.config.js. I'm going to rename this to use the Typescript extension. This is not important, but I like to do this. And then inside of this Tailwind configuration file, I'm going to update this content. So by doing this, I'm telling Tailwind CSS that it should watch all of these files that are present inside of this entry points and components folder that ends with .tsx extension. And whatever CSS class, Tailwind class is being used in all of these files should be compiled to one single file. so that I can just include that file in my content script or wherever I want to include for my current project. Then we need to go to main.css file that we have created inside of this assets folder, and then I'm simply going to delete this old style and add these directives, base components and utilities. And that's it. This is all you needed to do to make Tailwind CSS work. So let's see if this is actually working or not. I'll go to my content script, and inside of this you can see that I'm using this class injected heading. So I'm gonna remove this. So I'll add some Tailwind classes over here. As you can see, I'm gonna restart the development server, and now I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna reload the extension. So you can see that our styles are working as expected, but I think there's some problem. So if you notice here, I have applied a text of 3XL, and it seems that the font size are not being applied correctly. And the reason for that is pretty simple. So what we are doing right now is we are including all of these styles directly in the YouTube page, but that page already contains its own styles, which is conflicting with our Tailwind CSS styles. To fix this style collision, we can use a shadow DOM. Now there are 3 types of UI we can inject in the page, and they all have their own pros and cons. For example, if we inject an integrated UI, we won't be getting isolated styles, we won't be getting isolated events, and also the hot module replacement is not gonna work. And that means every time you make a change in your code, you need to manually come to browser and do a full reload of the extension to see the changes. The biggest benefit of this is that you can use the page context. Now this is important for several reasons. I can point to right now. And the first thing is that with integrated UI, I get access to all the content that is present on the page. And the second thing is, imagine that you are creating a Chrome extension which works with some of the authenticated part of the application. That means user must be logged in. And if that application has implemented a cookie-based authentication, you can directly make a request from the page itself. Cookie will be included, and then you will be automatically authenticated. So these two are some of the very important reasons when you would use integrated UI. Now shadow root UI is better in a sense that it gives you isolated styles, isolated events, and then it also gives you the page context. The only problem with this is that you do not get hot module replacement. And then finally, you can also create an iframe UI in which you can get all of these things, but you won't be able to access the page context. So depending upon your use case, you are going to use any of these options. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to be using shadow root UI. So I'll come to my content script file. And first of all, I'm going to get rid of this import statement at the top. And I'm also going to get rid of all of this code. Now we need to add some properties. So the matches part is clear that we want to inject this script in all the pages of the YouTube. And then I'm going to add this another property, CSS injection mode. Now the accepted value of CSS injection mode is manifest manual UI. I'm going to choose UI because we'll be creating a shadow root UI. And just to explain what all of these options mean. So when you choose the manifest, you're essentially telling WXT that include this CSS in the manifest file under the content script CSS array. And then when you set the option to manual, you can exclude the CSS from the manifest. But in this case, you need to manually load the CSS file. Now the last option is UI. So when you set CSS injection mode to UI, you are essentially excluding the CSS from the manifest file, but CSS will be automatically added to your user interface whenever you call create shadow root UI. And that is why we are using UI as the value to the CSS injection mode. And then we can add another property, run it, and set its value to document end. So what this means is execute this script when the entire HTML of the document is available. And then inside of this main function, we can get the context. Inside of this main function, I'm going to paste some code. So let's go through this code one by one. So first what I'm doing is I'm actually calling this create shadow root UI function. Now this function expects you to pass 2 arguments. In the first argument, we pass the context that we get from here. And in the second argument, we pass a configuration object. And then in the second argument, we pass an object. When we call this function, we get the UI instance, and then we call this mount method present in this UI instance to inject this element to the DOM. Now let's see what are the possible options that we pass inside of this configuration object. So the first property is the name property, and we are specifying Zen UI as the name property. So what this create shadow root UI is going to do, this is actually going to create a custom HTML component. And that custom HTML component is going to contain our shadow DOM. In the browser, this is going to be the HTML tag name of that custom component. Now the second property is this position property. We're setting its value to inline, which basically means inject this shadow DOM according to normal flow of the document. Then we are setting the anchor element to the body, and then we have this onMount method available to us. In this onMount, we get access to the container, right? And here what we are doing is we are just creating a div element. We are appending this div element to the container that we get access from here, and then we are creating a root by passing the div that we have created. In this root, we are going to render this Zen UI component that we are going to be creating in a bit, and then finally we are returning this root from here. Now if you see here, we're calling the create root method that is present inside of the React DOM. That means we need to import React DOM. So at the top of the file, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to import React DOM from React DOM client. Next, we need to create a Zen UI component. So at the root of the project, I'm going to create a components folder. And within this components folder, I'm going to create a file. Let's call this Zen UI.tsx. Now this is going to be a very simple component. The first thing that we are going to be doing is we are importing all of the Tailwind CSS styles. Then we are importing the Zen icon. This is also going to be a component that we are going to create in a bit. And then we are creating some state variables. And then we are returning some JSX from here. This JSX just contains a heading element, and then this div which contains an input, and then we are updating the value of these state variables depending upon if the user is typing something in the input. Let me quickly create this another component, Zen icon. So this is going to be a very simple icon component which is just going to return this svg from here. Now we can come to Zen UI, and now we can see that we are not seeing any error related to this import statement. Now let's go to content.tsx file and let's import this Zen UI. Okay, so this is pretty much what we needed to do to inject this shadow root UI that we have created in the DOM. Let me explain this one more time, like what we are doing here. This content script export default a function called define content script. And we actually call this function by passing a configuration object, as you can see. In this object, we specify a few important properties. In the matches, we are specifying that this script should be injected in all the pages of the youtube.com. And then since we are creating a shadow root UI, we are setting the CSS injection mode to UI, which is going to automatically import the CSS for our injected UI. And then we are specifying that this script should be executed when all the HTML is available. When all the HTML is available, we call this create shadow root UI by passing all of these options. And then we finally mount this UI to the DOM. Now at this point, if I go to my youtube.com, let me quickly do a full page reload like this. So now if I just come here, you'll see that we are seeing this injected UI. But it seems to me that everything is looking very, very small. What is the reason for this? Let me explain. If I inspect this, you'll see that we have actually inserted this custom component called Zen UI, and this contains our shadow DOM, as you can see over here, right? But everything is looking very, very small. And the reason for that is because inside of this shadow DOM, we are applying all of the styles according to Tailwind CSS. And Tailwind CSS uses a rem-based value, and rem is a value that depends upon the root font size. So if I take a look at the HTML of the YouTube page, you can see that the font size is set to 10 pixel. That means every value of Tailwind CSS is being calculated from the perspective of 10 pixels instead of the default value of 16 pixels. So you can see that the font size is set to 10 pixel in the HTML document. If I increase this to 16 pixels, you'll see that we are getting the UI what we need. But we are not going to be doing this, because if we do this, this is going to affect every single element on the page. And we do not want to do that. We want to keep the UI that we have created completely separate, and it should not affect any functionality on the existing page in terms of UI and functionality. So what we are going to be doing is we are actually going to modify our Tailwind configuration to calculate all the values as pixels directly. So I'm going to stop the development server right now, and then I'm going to go to tailwind.configuration file, and then I'm simply going to override this theme property with these custom values. Now don't worry, I'll provide all of this code in the GitHub repo so you can take a look at all of these values. Now if I just restart my development server, go to the browser, reload this extension, come here, you'll see that the root font size is still set to 10 pixel, but the UI that we are seeing over here is according to 16 pixels. Perfect. Let's now implement the search functionality. That means I should be able to write something here and it should take me to the search page. So for that, what I'm going to be doing is I'll go to my Zen UI component, and inside of this input, I'm going to add a prop on key down. So whenever a user presses any key, I want to call this function. And then in this callback function, the first thing that we are going to be doing is we are first checking if the user has pressed the enter key. If the user has hit the enter key, we are first doing some very basic validation. And then we are creating the search URL by encoding the search query. And then we are setting the window.location.href to this search URL. So let's see if this is working or not. I'll come here, I'll search for, let's say, my channel. And when I hit enter, you'll notice that we are being redirected to this results page. But I'm not seeing anything over here. So what is going on? Let me explain what is going on. So if we go to content script, you'll see that we have specified that this script is going to be injected in all the pages of youtube.com, right? And when this script is injected, what we are doing is we are simply appending this shadow root UI into the DOM. And this has some fixed position styling. And because of that, it is appearing on top of every other element. But the thing is, even though we want this script to be executed in all of the pages so that our UI is present in the DOM, but we do not want our UI to be present in all of the pages. Let me explain this one more time what I'm saying. When I say match all the pages, what I am saying is user open any page, just run this script and make this UI available as part of the DOM. Okay. And then through this another method, we are going to control in which page we are going to show this UI and in which page we are going to hide this UI. Okay. So that means now we need to adjust our code a little bit. So the first thing that I'm going to be doing is I'm simply going to create this variable where to show custom UI. And here I'm simply specifying this match pattern. And if you notice carefully, I'm specifying the home page route for the YouTube, right? So this essentially represents the home page of the YouTube. And then I can create a function called check if we can inject the UI. This is going to accept the URL and just check if this URL is present inside of this array. If the URL is present, this is going to return true. And if this is true, we are going to inject the UI. So now we can create another function that is actually going to create and mount the UI. So I've just created this another function, mount shadow root UI. This expects you to pass the context. And then we are simply creating that same shadow root UI. And then we're just calling this mount method inside of this mount shadow root UI function. I can simply await this now, mount shadow root UI, and pass my context like this. And this context is going to be of type content script context. So let's also import that from WXT client. But now this time we just do not want to call this function directly. We need to do a check. So what we are going to be doing is we are just checking if we can actually inject the UI in the current page. If we can, we are going to create and mount the shadow root UI. Okay, let's see if this is working as expected or not. I'll come here, I'll do a full reload of this extension. You can see that we have reloaded this results page and we are not seeing the UI over here. But if I come to my home page and do a full page refresh, you'll see that this UI appears. Now there is still one problem. Let me show you. So if I search for something here, let's say my channel, we come here and then I click on this YouTube logo button to go back to the home page, you'll see that we are not seeing the UI that we should be seeing. So what is going on? So this is a problem with single page application. So as you know that most of these modern applications that we build nowadays, they are highly optimized and they do implement a lot of caching, and all of these application follows more like a hybrid approach. So that means from time to time, they are going to behave more like a single page application. And if you have some experience of building single page applications, you will know that we simply hijack the address in the address bar, and it is actually not a full page reload in that sense. So when this happens, our content script does not get the time to be executed, right? So in single page applications, websites do not perform a full reload when changing paths. And this causes a problem because your content script does not get executed. And obviously the order matters. For example, if I do a full page reload of this home page, you'll see that I'm seeing this UI because we executed the content script, and in this home page, we needed to inject this UI. That's why this UI is here. But if I search for something, we come to the search page, that UI is not over here, because that UI shouldn't be here according to the logic that we have implemented so far. But if you are here, do a full page reload and then go back to the home page from here, you are not going to see that UI. Again, because even though you have come to the home page, we did not do a full page reload. So that is why when I do a full page reload, this fixes this problem. So what we can do, we can listen for the changes in the address bar. Now to handle limitations with the single page application, I'm actually going to add an event listener. And this event listener is going to be fired whenever the address in the address bar gets changed. Here we can get access to the new URL. And then we are checking if we can inject the UI in this current URL. If we can, we are going to call this function mount shadow root UI. Okay. And if you notice carefully, I'm also doing something like if the UI ref is not present. And the reason for that is because we do not want to inject multiple elements in the DOM. So for that, what I'm going to be doing is at the top of the file, I'm actually going to create a reference, and let's import shadow root content script UI from WXT client and root from React DOM client. And now I'm going to use this reference to gain access to the shadow root UI instance that we have created. And I'm going to simply update the reference like this. So now here's what is going to happen. Whenever the URL gets changed, we are going to check if we can inject the UI, and if we do not have the already injected UI, in that case we are going to create and inject the UI. Okay, but for all those other scenario in which, let's say, the user does a full page reload, we are going to simply check if we can inject the UI in this current page, and then yes, and then if yes, we are going to simply create and inject the UI. Do keep in mind that this event listener is only going to be executed when the URL gets changed. That is why we have added this condition also over here. Okay, let's see if this is working as expected or not. So I'm gonna do a full reload of this extension, and now you can see that in the YouTube, I'm seeing this UI. But if I go to, let's say, results page, I'm not seeing this UI over here. If I go to the premium page now, you'll see that I'm getting this UI again. And let's try doing that other way also. So let's go to search page. We are here. I'm going to do a full page reload, and then from here, I'm going to go to this home page by clicking on this link. And you can see that we are seeing the UI. Perfect. So this is working as expected. So at this point, I can see this UI. I can search for things. And then here I can click on any of these videos to see my things. Now in this watch page, if I have turned on the Zen mode, I should not be seeing this recommendation also. So let's see what we can do about this. Inside of this assets folder, I'm actually going to create a separate file. Let's call this reset.css. And in this file, I'm going to create a CSS variable Zen mode status. And initially I'm setting its value to not activated. And then I'm adding few conditional styles. So what this means is that if the value of the Zen mode status is activated, we are going to simply append these styles to the page. Okay, you do not need to worry about what all of these styles is doing. It is just that it is simply going to hide the recommendations in the YouTube watch page and make the content a little bit to the centered side so that it looks a little bit nicer. Okay, the only important thing that you need to see is that this style will only be applied when the value of this CSS variable Zen mode status is set to activated. Okay, now here's the thing. In order to import these styles, I cannot simply import them directly inside of the content script. Specifically in our case, let me show you why not. So if I go to this entry points and then to my content script file, and then at the top of the file, if I try to import this assets and then reset.css, I can come to browser, reload my page, reload my extension. And now if I inspect this, click on this HTML element and try to find the variable that we have declared, which is Zen mode, you'll see that I'm not seeing anything related to that. But if I go to home page, which basically injects our UI to the DOM, and then I inspect this DOM, click on the HTML that is present inside of the shadow root, you'll see that we have this variable Zen mode status is present. And the reason why this is happening is because all of the CSS that we are including doing in the content script will become part of this shadow DOM that we are injecting in the original document object model. That means all of our styles and their properties will be encapsulated inside of this shadow DOM. So we need to handle this scenario in a little bit different way. So I'm simply going to remove this import statement from here. And then what I'm going to be doing is I'm actually going to inject this reset.css file to all the pages of YouTube using a different approach. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to move this reset.css file inside of the entry points folder. Okay. And then we need to go to WXT configuration file. Inside of this WXT configuration file, we can use some of the hooks that are available to us. So I can simply uncomment these hooks. And the hooks that we are specifically interested in is this build manifest generated. This is some of the boilerplate code that I got from the WXT documentation. The only important thing that you need to understand from here is that I'm essentially injecting a file which is present inside of the assets directory. The name of the file is reset.css, and I'm injecting this file in all the pages of the youtube.com. Now the question is why I have specified assets reset.css when I have moved my reset.css file inside of this entry points folder. What is going on? Let me show you. If I restart my development server, you will see that inside of this output directory, inside of this Chrome MV3 folder, there exists a folder called assets, and that includes our reset.css file. Okay, so the location that I have specified over here is not the location of my working directory, but the location of this file that is present inside of the compiled code over here. Alright, so just by doing this, our reset.css file, which contains this code, should now be injected to each and every page of the youtube.com. Okay, let's now see if this is working as expected or not. I will come to the browser, I will reload my extension, then I will search for something, let's say my channel, and then I'll click on any of this video. Right now you can see that I'm seeing all of these recommendations over here. But the thing is, if I just change the value of my CSS variable Zen mode status to activated, these recommendations should be hidden. So if I just hit enter, you'll see that this is working as expected. Perfect. Now before we hook this logic with our content script, let's actually implement the pop-up functionality that will appear when we click on this Zen YouTube extension icon. So right now you can see that we are having this WXT React boilerplate pop-up page. I'll come to the code editor, and here what I'm going to be doing is inside of this pop-up folder, I'm actually going to delete this app.css file, then this style.css file also. So we now just have these three files, app.tsx, index.html, and then main.tsx. Index.html is the actual HTML pop-up page. This is including this main.tsx file. If we go inside of this file, you'll see that we are importing the app component and rendering this app component in the element that has the ID of the root. We have deleted this style.css. Let me quickly delete this import also. And then inside of this app.tsx file, I'm going to replace all this code with this very simple code. So you can see what I'm doing here is we have just added some JSX element over here, and then this just contains a toggle. And since this is using Tailwind CSS, so it's a good idea that we also include the Tailwind CSS file inside of this file. So you can either include the Tailwind CSS file in this one, or you can go to main.tsx file, and here we can import the file main.css that is present inside of this assets folder, this one, because this is the one that contains all the Tailwind CSS code. So now I can come here, I'm simply going to restart the development server, then I'll come to the browser, and you can see that we are seeing this UI Zen YouTube. And if I just click on this toggle, you can see that this toggle is working as expected. So now our toggle is working as expected, but this is working in an isolated environment inside of that pop-up page only, and our content script is not linked with this toggle. So we are gonna fix this by using the browser storage. We'll store some data inside of this storage, and both our content script and pop-up can access the storage. So pretty much this is what I'm talking about. So imagine this is your youtube.com web page, and then you have this pop-up. In the browser storage, we can store some of the information, and then both of these pop-up and the content script can access data from this storage. In order to use the browser storage, the first step is to add the necessary permission. So we need to come to WXT configuration file, and in this one we need to add a permissions option, and we only need two permissions for now, tabs and storage. The reason why we need tabs permission is because whenever the user changes the toggle, I want to reload all the tabs in which YouTube is opened. Then I'll come to my content script. Let me zoom out a little bit. Here I'm going to import storage from WXT storage, and here the first thing that I'm going to be checking is the status of the Zen mode. So you can see that I'm using this method storage.getItem, and then I'm looking for this key which is present in the local storage. So this is really important. Whenever you need to store any of the information inside of the storage, there are multiple storage available, and local colon represents that we have stored this information inside of the local storage. So that is why when it comes to accessing this information, we are starting with local, and then we specify the key. If this is not present, as a fallback, we are setting its value to not activated. Okay, now I'm going to wrap all of this code inside of this condition that if the Zen mode status is activated, only in this scenario we are gonna be executing this code. And also when the Zen mode status is activated, we also need to change the value of Zen mode status CSS variable to activated. However, if the Zen mode status is not activated, we'll come here and we are going to set this to not activated. Okay, this is all we needed to do to make this work on the content script side. Okay, now let's go to app.tsx file inside of the pop-up. In this one, what I'm going to be doing is I'm essentially going to create an use effect. Okay, and inside of this use effect, what we are doing is, depending upon if we have the Zen mode status or its value is activated, we are setting is Zen mode to true and false. Okay, we also need to update this handle toggle function. So whenever the user clicks on the toggle to change the state, what we need to do, so we need to set this value in the local storage. The key is Zen mode status, and its value is going to be either activated and not activated depending upon the status of the toggle. Then we are going to update this one to reflect on the UI, and then after that I'm going to get all of the YouTube tabs that are present, and then I'm simply going to reload all of those tabs. So let's see if our extension is working as expected or not. I'm gonna restart my development server just once. Okay, and now I'll come here, I'll come to extension, I'll do a full reload. So right now if I click on this, you'll see that right now the Zen mode is turned off. If I enable this Zen mode, you'll see that the page gets reloaded and we are seeing this very minimal UI. All of the distracting elements are hidden. And if I go to the home page, you'll see this option. What are you looking for? However, if I just come here and disable this Zen mode, it will revert back to the original UI. Perfect. So this is working as expected. Let's now see how we can update the extension icon that we have present over here. If you are using WXT framework, you have this very handy npm module available to you called auto icons. So first I'm going to install this auto icons as a dev dependency, as you can see, and then we need an icon image. So I'll go to ChatGPT, and here I'm going to specify to ChatGPT, create a icon for my Chrome extension that allows users to watch YouTube videos without distractions. Okay, so you can see that I got this icon. I'm happy with this one. I'm simply going to download this. Okay, so as you can see, I have moved this icon inside of the assets folder. Now the first thing is I'm going to rename this. So I'm going to say icon, and you can see that the extension for this is WebP. We do not want to use WebP. We need to use a PNG image. So I'm going to do PNG here, and this should still work. And then we need to come to WXT configuration file. And in this modules, we also need to include the auto icons like this. Now, according to the documentation, this is pretty much what you needed to do to make this work. But if I start my development server and check out this output directory, you will notice two folders, icon and icons. So this is either probably a bug or something that I'm not understanding correctly. So you can see that it is actually generating all of the proper versions for our icons, as you can see, but it is also including all those icons that we get by default. And if I go to the browser and try accessing and try reloading my extension, you'll see that I'm not getting my icon. I'm only getting the default icon over here. So to fix this problem, what we can do, we can come to the WXT configuration file, and below this permissions tab, I'm going to specify this icons property. And here I'm going to specify all of my icons, like 16 by 16 version is present inside of icons 16.png. These locations are inside of the output directory. So this is what I'm specifying over here. Okay. So now if I come here, do a reload, you'll see that we are getting these icons. And by the way, we are getting these black and white icons right now because we are in the development mode. Okay. If you want, you can disable this behavior, but this is fine for me. So this is how you change the icon of the browser extensions. Now, right now you can see that the total size is 3.3 MB. And the reason for that is because we are running in the development mode. So let's say if I want to test the production version of this, I can simply execute this command pnpm build. When I do this, it is going to create a Chrome version for me. So right now you can see that the total size has been reduced to 479 KB. And the folder is here only. We need to work with this folder only. So now if I go to extension, I can reload this. You can see that the icon is no longer black and white, and it should work as expected. So if I just come here, I enable the Zen mode, this is working. I can search for things. Okay, so this is working as expected. I can disable the Zen mode. Perfect. Okay, how do we test if this is also working for Firefox browser? Well, in order to test this on the Firefox browser, what you can do, you need to create a zip. So you need to run this command pnpm zip :firefox, and this command is available to you in the package.json. So if we take a look at the package.json, you'll see this command zip firefox. Okay, so when you do this, this is going to create two zipped folder inside of your output directory. As you can see, first one ends with firefox.zip and the second one ends with source.zip. Then I'm going to open the Firefox developer edition. I'm using this one, and then here you need to type about :debugging, and after this you will see this screen. You need to click on this Firefox. You need to click on load temporary add-on, and then from within your output directory you need to choose the zip that ends with firefox.zip. Okay, so I'm gonna click on this, click on open, and now you can see that the extension is installed. So if I go to youtube.com, I'm seeing all of these things. I can click on this one, enable the Zen mode. You can see this is working as expected. I can search for things. Perfect. All right, that's it for this video. If you found this video valuable or helpful in any way, do like and subscribe to my channel. I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you.